listening to the Mark Bradford Alchemy for Life podcast.
Is your dissonance for Flair? Or maybe you just have a flair for dissonance? Well, hey there. I was recently watching a young man entertain a small group of people with his cello. The setup was simple in that he just had a cello footpedal and some additional music he played through a Bluetooth speaker. The footpedal apparently allowed him to turn the page for the music and do other things. After every song and applause, he would comment about his music and his process. He was a bit self-defacing in that he was almost apologetic about his skill level. He was very humble. More often than not, he would explain that he wasn't as good as he wanted to be, that some songs were better than others. Then he made an interesting comment that created an exchange between the two of us. He knew he wasn't hitting all the notes he needed to, and that when that happened, his dissonance was supposed to be for Flair. So half-jokingly, he said it was dissonance for Flair, meaning the wrong notes were there artistically, not because they were in error. So if he hit the wrong note, he meant to do that. Without even pausing, I immediately flipped it back over to him and yelled quietly, "Well, then you have a flair for dissonance." He seemed to like this, and so did the person sitting next to me, as she literally wrote down "flair for dissonance." The wrong notes may be better. We often become very concerned with hitting all the notes in life, literally and figuratively, right? We always want to do the right thing, we always want to get everything right and accurate and so forth, but like the young cellist, is it not just as important that we don't? Isn't that lack of hitting every note robotically what uniquely makes us us and actually makes for better music? Aren't some of the best mistakes the most amazing discoveries? I'm not saying that if you're a surgeon or a chemist, you just wing it. I'm saying the little differences that move us off the beaten path, even just mere moments and choices, allow us to write our own music. Taking this a step further, the young man, Teague, was making a half joke about how his lack of skill was really an intentional missing of notes. Thus the comment, dissonance for Flair. Again, meaning that the incorrect notes were a conscious choice and sort of an artistic thing. My comment, however, is something that perhaps is also worth considering. Since we know that we will not hit all the notes, why not get really good at this not hitting the notes? Why not understand yourself better, your strengths and weaknesses? Why not develop a flair for dissonance? And perhaps this is the essence of creativity. Consider that. The things in your life that you've attempted to be creative with or are creative with, perhaps that's how you make a living, perhaps it's not, perhaps you just have some hobbies, or even in the standard boring workplace in which you create projects. Has your success and what has set you apart from others been that you just simply robotically, methodically do things? Again, not taking away from people who robotically, methodically do things because certain professions require that. What I'm saying is, are there times in your life in which you make a mistake and go, "Oh, I didn't ever consider that, nor would I have considered that, but because I made a mistake, that's kind of better"? I mean, personally for me, I think of cooking that way. When I became a single dad and started to cook for my kids and explored various meats and made sure I didn't kill them through not cooking it correctly, I started experimenting with cooking, and then I asked them to challenge me, and then I started making all sorts of stuff. But I found that when I followed the recipe to the letter robotically and was terrified to make sure I did it right, I didn't really learn anything. I followed the recipe by rote. I said, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then it turned out. But I didn't understand the interaction between the ingredients. I didn't understand cooking times and things like that. But then I messed something up royally, or more than one thing royally. And that's when I learned. I learned in making homemade pizza about when to put the toppings on and how that made such a huge difference. And that's something that the recipes never talked about. But because I messed it up so badly and then made a mistake in the right direction, like forgetting the onions and putting them on just before it was done and going, oh, these are a little crispy. A little crunchy. I kind of like that. And so is that not when we learn things about our creativity? I mean, it's a process. So instead of saying, today I'm going to be creative, you might just put your best foot forward and say, man, I screwed that up, but, well, that was interesting. What can I pull out of that screw up that's actually useful? What part of that is me not paying attention? And what part of that is, well, me being me? So I'm saying I hope you find a lot of you in your screw ups and they're positive. And these things that we mess up, these notes that we don't hit, this dissonance, I think helps us to stay on our path. Sometimes it's the getting the stuff wrong that says, no, this is why we're better at this than we think we are. This is what makes us special about this. And to get mundane into business again, because I'm sure if you're listening, you may have a fairly mundane job. If you have this mundane job, you may find that you have a system in place by which you do things, or you've learned from another person via their system. And when you've tried to wing it, you've come full circle and thought, oh, that's why they do it this way. They already figured that out. Okay, because when I do it this way, it wastes a tremendous amount of time and creates a tremendous amount of stress. So I now get it. By stepping off the path, by hitting the wrong notes, you may actually learn why the right notes are important in this case versus in other ways, just like in art, where hitting the wrong notes actually may make a better product. So do me a favor, in the upcoming week, think about some notes you don't hit and what that means. Because you may find in this upcoming week, there are a couple times in which you were going to beat yourself up for getting something wrong or doing something different, but then find that that was actually a learning experience and pretty good. So let me know. I always appreciate feedback. I get notes here and there, and I really, really enjoy them. So if you have some feedback on this particular podcast, please let me know. Thank you. And one last thing. The gentleman that I mentioned in this podcast is actually someone I stopped and introduced myself to at the end of his performance. I told him how great he was, and I invited him to be on the show. He agreed and was on his way back to Spain. So what I did was I tried to schedule him on so that he could be on this particular show. If you're hearing this, it means we probably didn't get our schedules together, and he'll be on another show. So what I did was I recorded this first, just in case, because that's how I am, so that I would still have a show for this Sunday. So if you're hearing this, it's because we couldn't connect, but we will eventually get that recorded, or maybe it was recorded but just couldn't get in the can for you for this day that you're listening right now. And hopefully you got enough out of this, because I think this is really, really important. The Flair for dissonance and the dissonance for Flair, I just think are very, very cool things. Thanks again. Hey there, thanks for listening. You know I always appreciate your feedback, right? Well, here's your chance. You can connect with me on Instagram, via the Alchemy for Life site, or most other social media. If you like this podcast, you may love my new book, Alchemy for Life, Formulas for Success. The 239-page paperback is available on Amazon and everywhere else you get your books. All this info is available at Alchemy for Life. Thank you. See you next week.